raised in the small, hard-working wool and timber town of Leeburn. This tough-as-nails prop forward clocked up 24 games for his state in the Origin Arena and is undoubtedly one of the most feared rugby league players to ever lace on a boot. It's none other than the warhorse himself, Shane Webcke. How are you, mate?
Buller, I'm well. It's a pleasure to be in the car with you driving around.
Grown up in Leeburn, born there, raised, mum, dad, brother Dallas.
Yep.
What were those early years like, mate?
Mate, they were wonderful, to be honest. Brought up in a very different era to what we live in today.
Yeah.
And in a little country town like Leeburn, and in those days, there wasn't a lot of sport around. Like, people played, you played cricket or you played rugby league.
Yeah, that was it.
And my mum and dad couldn't afford for us to do both. So we had to pick. Naturally, we picked rugby league. And mate, can I tell you, the greatest decision of my little life, which I didn't know I was making, and in fact, Mum took me to rugby league because I had such a filthy temper. She thought that maybe...
I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, I know. I realised you would know that would be crazy. But so Mum took me over to play rugby league because she thought if I played a team sport, that I would understand that it wasn't all just about me, and that I couldn't lose my temper because, you know, it had hurt other people in the team because of it. Well, as you know, that actually never worked. And I kept losing my temper. Anyway, the long and short of it is, mate, growing up in a country town like Leeburn, we travelled everywhere. Like, when we played rugby league, we travelled to training because it was in another town.
Yeah.
All the other teams, like, we played in the Warwick District competition, so we had teams in places like Gundawindi, Stanthorpe, Texas. So everywhere we travelled. But that was the magic of it. Like, you know what footy's like, and you know what it's like when you're playing with kids. So, mate, all of my lifelong friends are the boys that I played rugby league with in those years. Yeah. And so the other part of that was we always had to travel and carpool. Yeah. And mate, those memories, they're my most persistent memories, if you like, but also my fondest memories of growing up in a country town, playing rugby league. Mate, that's why I love our sport. Petero, I'm passionate about our game for the very reason of the things that I've got in me that came from it. But they were born in those years. Now, I was lucky, as were you, that we found the pathway to go and play for the Bronx and all the fun and times that we had. But mate, my life would have been diminished having not had that experience. Yeah. But what I love that it was part of my growing up, and I know there's things in me that have helped me be successful in life that are due solely to the fact that I played our game.
Yeah, unreal. When you think about those early days, you talk about the influence of mum and dad, but like, were there people outside of your direct family, like, you know, people at your junior footy club that you talk about your mates, those influential people? Who are the type of people that you can remember?
Well, mate, our coaches.
Yep.
There's a bloke out there called Petero Civoniceva who's the most wonderful bloke, and he has been a coach for these little they're underage teams, but they're underweight teams. So the under 35s and under 40s they used to be.
That's right. I remember those days.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a long time ago. But he's coached those sides for 50 years.
Amazing.
50 straight years he has done that, and he don't get paid for it. And he's a dairy farmer. So mate, and he was a huge influence on all of us. Yeah. But then I could name all the coaches. Yeah. All the coaches that were part of my junior years, mate. Every single one of them influenced us in a positive way. And then, you know, and I think of the mothers. I think of all the mothers of my mates, and all the mothers of the blokes who ran the canteen, who looked after the jerseys, who did all that. Those sort of people. See, where I was very fortunate, all I ever saw was people who worked. Yeah. Who worked and were selfless and who looked after their kids, our kids, and had this wonderful sense of community. Yeah. So, you know, and I get really passionate about it because I just think how lucky I was to have those influences. And you know it, mate, because those good influences in life are so important, because the opposite of that, if you get infected with those, they're very hard to leave behind. So I was bloody fortunate.
You know, you talk about those influential people, and I was going to say, you know, your mum, she's been an absolute off you. I want to say publicly, thank you, Mrs. Webcke, for sending your son. I can attest to the fact, yes, he did have an anger problem. I saw it on many occasions. But like, you know, that decision for her to make, you know, to get you into footy, and obviously your brother Dallas as well. Did he play footy through juniors as well as yourself into senior footy as well?
Yeah, no, he did. But he was different to me. He was better than me. and everyone.
Well, mate, I was actually leading
No, I
up to
know.
this
I know
question.
exactly where you were heading with that.
Yeah.
So I'll catch off at the pass. But he was a very, very talented footballer. But it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
And people make those decisions, and whether he made it consciously or not, but he just didn't go on with it.
Yeah.
He did come to the Broncos
that's
as a
right.
trialist
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
while,
yeah.
and I think he might have ran with you for a bit. I'm not sure.
Yeah. They passed me.
But I tell you, it's a bigger story than that with my mother.
Yeah.
So when my father passed away, now this is really pertinent. So when my father was killed in a workplace accident, that was right at the start of my Broncos years, and I actually went home. You may not remember this, but I went home obviously when he was killed, and I was there for 6 or 7 weeks, and I didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go back because two things. I was actually failing, and I was failing because I was trying too hard. I'd gone down there accidentally because Wayne went up to sign Pricey at a game and he signed me. Not that I talk about that.
No,
you know?
no.
I don't like.
Again, you cut me off.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. We'll go back to that. But anyway, so I'd sort of landed in Brisbane accidentally to do this, and so then Dad was killed. I go home.
So, sorry, you're 19?
Yeah, I was 19, and Dad passing away sort of brought out all this stuff in me, and I, you know, my father was working away from our farm because our farm wasn't viable anymore. So I had this thing in my head that I could go home and they could do that because I was ready to leave Brisbane. I was ready to leave footy. And I went to my mum with this plan after we buried Dad and got through that. I went to my mum with this plan and I said, Mum, I'm going to do this. And she said, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea, Shane. And I said, Mum, I reckon it is a good idea. And we went back and forth a bit. And in the end, she said, well, listen, you can do whatever you want, but you won't be doing it here. And I, you know, because of the immaturity I had at that point in time, I took that the wrong way. Because years later, my mother said to me that at that time when she said, you go back, and I did go back. At that time, she confessed later on, and I knew this when I got a bit older, is that all she wanted me to do was stay because she was alone, she was frightened, she didn't know what the next thing was. But she had enough in her, and that's that generation of people. That's our parents' generation, mate, who are tough. And she just put me first, and I'll never stop thanking her for that. But anyway, I go back to Brisbane with a totally different perspective, mate. And that's the thing that makes us all better in life is perspective.
Yes.
So this perspective I had now was that football wasn't the most important thing I was ever going to do. And so whatever Wayne saw in me that day, it came back. And things kicked on from there. But the interesting story is about how I got there. And this involves a mutual friend of ours, the great Stephen Price, whom desperately wanted to be a Broncos player. And so we were playing an under-18 grand final in Toowoomba. I was playing for Wattles, he was playing for Newtown.
That's right.
Now, he was destined to be a footballer. Like, he made sides and all the rest of it. First Queensland side I made was the Queensland State of Origin side. And I only say that for the reason that that's why I didn't really harbour an ambition to be an NRL player. So anyway, Wayne comes up to watch this game because Newtown's coach, and I forget what his name was, but anyway, he knew Wayne, and he asked him to come up and watch Price because he's going to be a player. And we all knew that, and we all knew that Wayne was going to be there, number one. And so that was no surprise to anyone. Anyway, so two things happened that day that weren't meant to. I don't think we'd beaten Newtown in that season, so we weren't.
They were the guns, huh?
Yeah, they were the guns. We weren't meant to beat them. We did. Stephen Price was meant to get signed to go and play for the Broncos. He didn't. Shane Webcke did.
There you go.
And do you know, Buller, I'm never going to understand what he saw in me that day. I'm never going to understand it. I'll never. And the game was obviously been lost. It was recorded somewhere, but it would have been the old VHS day. So it's lost. So I can't even look at it and work out, you know, what Wayne saw that day.
I've done a little bit of research, and I can tell you scored a try, right?
I don't, did I?
Yeah, you scored a try, and I also hear too that you saved a try as well. So
this bit I do remember. And it was funny, and I think it was their little hooker or something like that. He was actually over the line.
Yeah, right.
And you know this is accidental, but I reached out and I hooked him by the collar. And I held him up, and he's swirling around like a fish.
There you go.
And he couldn't score.
There you go.
I do remember that. So one thing I do remember about the game. Can I say this? As it was with our years of the Broncos, the reason that anyone can shine, mate, is because you're playing good teams.
Yeah.
And that team I was playing in that day was brilliant.
Yeah.
And mate, you know, and you know this, it's easy to be at some sort of level when those around you are so good.
Yeah.
And I was the beneficiary of that the whole way through my football career. I played in great junior sides, and then I went to a great club like the Broncos via Brisbane Brothers, who were also a great club. So all the way along, mate, you're supported, and you know as well as I do that makes the difference.
Leading into those early years at the Broncos, what was that like? You know, when you get the call from Wayne, it says, Shane, you're going to be suiting up for first grade today. What was that like? What moment like for you?
Well, it's a funny story actually, Paul, because, and it's funny, I was only talking to Wayne about this the other night. So I remember knowing I was close. Ivan Henjak, who was our coach in reserve grade, he told me, he said, mate, you're playing well enough to be in first grade, they're going to pick you one day. And I couldn't believe that, right? And anyway, and this had happened very quickly, very, very quick. This is like Dad's gone the year before. This is the start of the following season. And I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe how well it was all going. Anyway, Wayne comes up. You know, you remember when you walked into the old gym and where the notice board was?
That's it,
and you're sitting there to have all the notices and everything. And so I'm just leaning on that. And it was like, Wayne was like, you know someone's coming up, and you know what it was like when the early days when you first knew Wayne. You're thinking, don't come and talk to me, don't come and talk to me, don't come and talk to me. So I'm sitting there trying to look like I'm reading something. And anyway, I thought he's going to talk to me. He's going to say something to me. He comes up to me, and I'm going to swear now, so I apologise. He comes up to me and he says, right, no, nothing else except you're in first grade this weekend. Don't it up.
Oh, there you go.
And that is what he told me. Now, people who hear that might think, well, that's pretty harsh. But you know that man knows how to talk to people in all sorts of different ways. So he said that to me, and that was exactly the right thing to say to me, because I think to myself, you know what, Wayne, I won't.
There you go.
And that's how it, and then I spent all week being as nervous as hell. You know that, you went through it too.
Going into rep footy, playing State of Origin now, I don't think there's any more prouder Queenslander than yourself, because you know, standing out in the field and seeing you cut the ball up, you know, just put hairs on the back of your neck, you know, especially for the other forwards and that, like myself included. And what was that like, mate, for you playing for Queensland? You know, when you made your first your debut, you played your first match for Queensland. What was, you know, what were your feelings, mate?
Well, there's a couple of things, mate. There's a couple of things about it, right? And I was very, very fortunate that bit I understood. So first and foremost, mate, because it meant an incredible amount anyway, just playing for the Broncos. If I'd never played for anything else, it wouldn't worry me. But anyway, I get picked to play for Queensland, and I couldn't. See, when I was younger, before I resigned myself to the fact that I wasn't going to be a footballer, because I didn't make Queensland sides, and I find myself making that side. And I could not believe it, mate. I've never been so nervous in all my life. I remember I walked into the camp at the old Travel Lodge. And anyway, I walked in the lift, and there's Choppy Close. And Choppy looked at me, and I looked at him. And he said, "You hungry?" I said, "Yep." So we went to the buffet.
There we go.
And they had about 18 plates of tucker. And I thought, how good's this? No, mate, it was nerve-wracking, as you'd appreciate too. Like, it was very nerve-wracking, but, mate, again, got to play in an era with some of the best players that are ever going to play our game, and I, you know, had great sides, great coaches. It's just a wonderful experience from the get-go. The other thing was this, is that my dad was killed on the night of the second State of Origin in 1994, and so it just, when we got the second game, I had that in my head, and oh mate, it was big. It was really big. Not because I'm not a very. My dad wouldn't have appreciated it if I had made it about, I've got to do it for my dad and all the rest. He wouldn't appreciate that. I did it because I should, you know, try my hardest at doing what you're going to do. But I always felt that if there was some way he could see that, what it would mean to him, and it was a very moving thing. And I never told anyone about that, but it was my little thing. And I remember I'd go out and I'd look up in the sky when before kick-off. But you know what those things look like. They're emotional things.
Mate, you talk about passion and pride, and you mentioned Choppy, and I'm going to ask you this now. One of my great memories of being at an Origin camp for the first time was actually seeing you two boys square off. Now, tell us a bit about this. Like, You guys used to wrestle, right? But I'm telling you, this was beyond WWE or WWF. You guys went at it. I remember there was holes in walls. I remember
Yes,
there was
yes.
all sort of bedlam and break loose. Tell us about Choppy.
Right. Chris Clays is one of the best men I know, and it was my great good fortune that he was the Origin manager when I played. But I love fighting that big bastard. He is a big man, and he just. We love to eat, we love to drink, we love to fight.
Yeah.
And I just, mate, that was some of the great times of my life.
Mate, I think I was in a room beside you, and I just remember, mate, it sounded like there was a bloody massive brawl going on.
We used to have.
I peered in, and then you two just going hell for leather, mate. I'm sure the bed was tipped up.
Yeah, no, we had some great battles. And it became a thing.
Yeah,
it became a thing.
And we all expected that. And mate, like, it's funny, we talk about Choppy back then. Jeez, he's bloody a shadow of what he was back then.
But now he's well groomed.
Yeah.
He was always well groomed, but he's light. You know,
That's it.
I'd love to fight him now. I'd get him now.
Mate, you'd douche him up now. Just tell us a little bit about life now.
I read the sport on Channel 7 4 nights a week, and I really love that job. I think it's safety.